welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel if you're a returning viewer or subscriber. In today's video I'm going to be filming my August wrap up, so talking you through all the books that I read throughout the month of August. I read 4 books total, which I'm kind of semi-happy with. I read one kind of chunky book, but actually it wasn't the longer book that took me a long time to get through. It was the first book that I read. It was just like much slower paced than I thought it was going to be. I'm still happy to have read 4 books, all 4 of them that I featured in my August TBR video. I wanted to read 7 books in that and I only got to the 4, but what can you do? You never know how a month's actually going to go until you get down to it. So that's what today's video is going to be. I would usually combine my wrap-up videos with a TBR for the next month, but I actually don't think I'm going to set myself a TBR for September. There's a couple of books I know that I want to get to just because they're buddy reads. I'm in the middle of reading Fourth Wing, so that's obviously one that's going to happen. And I also want to read Twisted Games, that's another buddy read. And I also want to read Ricochet for certain, second book in the Addicted series. I've been putting that off for the longest time. But other than that, I've been kind of feeling like I need to mood read in order to stay motivated to keep picking up books at the rate I am, or to even increase that, and that means not setting a rigid TBR for myself. So the first book that I read in August, and the one that took me a little while to get through, like I said, was Happy Hour, or is Happy Hour? Was Happy Hour? By Marlowe Granados. When did this come out? 2021. It's only been out for a few years, but I've heard so many good things, and it's been on my wish list pretty much ever since I first saw it in the bookstore. I bought it with a gift card because it's quite expensive paperback. It was actually on last year's summer TBR, so I decided to finally pick it up this year and see what I think. Like I said, it took me a long time to get through. It is quite a short book. It's only like 260 pages or something, 280 pages. I felt like the pacing was kind of strange. So in this book, we're following 2 girls. We're following Isa and her best friend Gala. They decided to spend the summer in New York City. They're not New York City natives, but they just want to experience kind of a summer of living there. This book really starts from like the second that Isa kind of gets off the plane into New York. And like I said, she's living there with her friend Gala. The thing is with these girls is that while they love the high life, they love to go to parties, they love to drink, they love to meet people and socialize. The problem is that they can't work kind of a registered job because they don't have the papers for it. We don't actually go into a lot of depth as to why this is, but we do see the various jobs that the girls pick up, lots of ones that pay in cash and lots of ones that are kind of like through friends and things like that, in order to kind of support themselves, and they really are just kind of scraping by. Very relatable. The author did write this at the age of the girls, so you really do kind of feel like it is an accurate representation of what, you know, life can be like in your 20s. Another thing with this book is that there's a little author's note thing at the back which says that Marlowe Granados wrote this book to be fun for fun's sake. It's not meant to have some deep and meaningful message. It's literally just meant to be 2 girls thriving, which goes against the narrative of literary fiction books we've seen across the past couple of years, because we do love to see a kind of a sad girl narrative, but seeing 2 happy girls being happy is just really wonderful. But there were elements of this book that did feel very sad girl, and not just like in the way that, you know, a human living their life is going to be sad at points. Blend into that tone a little bit, but I definitely see what the author was going for, and I really like admire that as well. The thing was that when this book went to be published, the virus hit and everyone wanted to be reading about other people also not thriving, so this book kind of took a hard hit, but thankfully it has been as successful as the author and the publisher hoped it would be. This was a 5-star prediction, and it wasn't a 5-star read. It just didn't quite align with what I thought it was going to be, if that makes any sense. And I don't think you can fully capture that unless you're reading it, because this book is very much, you know, about the vibes. There's no real plot other than the girls trying to get by. The book is told like from day to day throughout the kind of 3 months of summertime. The author is very intelligent. There were some really quick-witted like one-liners that I was like, wow, this is amazing, and I'm very glad that I did annotate the book. I haven't even finished annotating it yet, but I've got so many tabs. It did read a little bit like a debut, or a book that was written by someone who like is a writer but is not a novelist, and obviously like this is a debut and that is the case, but I definitely kind of picked up on that. This was not like a seasoned piece of work, but it did have many like kind of interesting smart kind of hot takes. So overall I very much enjoyed it. I just wasn't as obsessed as I thought I could have been, but yeah, 4 stars to Happy Hour. Glad to have finally read it though. It's been on my TBR for a couple of years now, and we want to be reading stuff we own. So after finishing that book, the plan was always to go into a fun light romance read, and that was in the form of It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. It's my first Tessa Bailey book, probably her most popular release. People generally seem to love this one. It's quite a big chunky book, but I did actually read it quite quickly, and I definitely got very hooked in the story. So in this book we're following Piper, and she is kind of like a socialite living in LA. Her stepfather is extremely wealthy, and she just kind of lives off his money, off the allowance that he gives her. She spends a lot of her time partying and drinking and living it up, much like the girls in Happy Hour wish they were, although they don't have the budget for it. But there's this big scandal that happens. So her stepfather sends her away off to a little fishing village in Washington called Westport, or a fishing town, and that's actually where her biological father was from, and he was actually a fisherman within the town, a crab fisherman. king crabs or something. And while she's there, she meets a gruff fisherman called Brendan. So it's Grumpy meets Sunshine. Very different dynamics between the two characters. First up, I'm going to say Piper's character was so much less annoying than I thought she might have been. It's truly just me like going along with these books and like the stereotype of like having a character who, she's blonde and she's really pretty, has a great figure, and she dresses in designer, and she has this like little lipstick handbag that she's always carrying around, and I was just like, I'm gonna like go insane if I have to deal with her. But actually she was not like that at all, and she was definitely more grounded than I kind of gave her credit for. I also loved the setting. I loved the small town, but particularly one by the sea, and it made me just want to like be by the ocean and like be eating like fish and chips and stuff like that. I did definitely picture like a little English fishing village, not what this place was. It was at one point when I actually googled it because I wanted to see what it was like, and what it was so different to how I pictured it. But I was fine just like going on with my little Delulu fantasy. I thought that part was just like charming, and I loved all the characters other than Piper and her sister being like born and bred Westport, Washington. There was something at the end that really annoyed me. The ending overall was just kind of ridiculous in like a way that is very typical like contemporary romance book. My friend also read this book and she said it was very much like a film, and I completely understand. It was like one of those rom-coms which is like dashing across the world after someone, like that was the vibe. But yeah, there was one thing that Piper's sister did or said, I don't really want to go into spoilers, but it just confused things so much more, and I thought that little aspect of the conflict was so unneeded. The other thing with this book is that there's like this build up to the romance, and then the romance happens very early on in the book, within like the first like quarter of it, and then after that we're just kind of like seeing them in this lovey-dovey honeymoon stage, and then very last minute there's like the conflict. I thought the conflict was ridiculous, and the book's plot kind of fell off pretty quickly, partially because the main character Brendan, his heart and soul like set on Piper, which was cute but also perhaps a little bit unrealistic. This book is quite spicy. There are several scenes. There's not as many scenes as some of the books that I've read, but the scenes, like I just found it like some of the things that they did was kind of weird. Like, if you know, you know. And actually my friend who read this I don't think picked up on these things, but I'm about to go tell her. I think she's gonna like want to blow her rating, because there were some strange moments that were just never addressed, and I was just like, are we just gonna let those go? Or, and we did. But it was fun and it was light, and I felt like it was exactly what I felt like at that point in the month. I think that my rating is probably reflective of like how much I was in the mood for this book. I gave it 3.5 stars, which is like a very good rating. Enjoyable, you know, not like something that's going to stay with me for the rest of my life, but something that will continue to live on my shelves for a little bit longer. I'm not going to be unhauling this immediately, because I did enjoy my time reading it, and I associate kind of good memories with having read it as well. So throughout the month I've been reading a book called Despair by Vladimir Nabokov. I'm reading that for a video, which is going strangely because I'm procrastinating filming the intro, because it's a video that I care about, so I want it to be good. But because I was reading modern classic, and then I also picked up another modern classic, which is the fourth book I'm going to be talking about, I decided to pick up another kind of light rom-com, not really rom-com, like light romance read, and I picked up Every Summer After by Carley Fortune. So I did end up finishing this before the modern classic that I read fourth, but I started it after it, if that makes any sense. Every Summer After is childhood friends to lovers, and it also has a second chance romance in it. We're following two characters, I think Poppy and Sam. Is her name Poppy, or am I completely lying? Whatever. These two characters met when, wait, I probably should Google whether her name is Poppy. Every Summer After. Imagine if I was completely making this up. That's not her name. I was thinking of people we meet on vacation. Okay. Persephone. Percy. They call her Percy. Okay. Percy and Sam. Sam's family live in a lake house by a lake. Who would have thought? Percy's family live in Toronto. They buy a second family home to have as like a holiday home, which is next door to Sam's family home. So every single summer Percy comes down to the lake, and this starts from the age of like 13, and then we follow them all the way throughout school and up until both characters are in college, and then something goes wrong. Then we flash forward to when both the characters are 30 years old. Percy, whose family has since sold their lake house, has gone back to the lake after not having spoken to Sam in like 10 years, or more than that, like 12 years. And the reason why she's going back is because Sam's mother has passed away and the funeral's happening. Sam's brother called Percy and is like, just to let you know the funeral's happening, we thought that you would like to come. Percy was quite close with their mother, so she comes back and interact with Sam once again. That was exhausting. This relationship was going really well, then something bad happened, and then the characters lost contact, and then in the future we're seeing them again. The main argument I've heard about this book is that A, it's very similar to Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, which is a book I actually haven't read yet, and B, the conflict in the past is kind of like unforgivable. In my opinion, the thing in the past was truly terrible, and I'm someone who like hates reading about stuff like that, but I thought that within their situation there was some justification within it. Lots of people kind of review this book without mentioning what the problem in the past was, by just like saying how like horrible it is and like really going in on it. But I think actually they're just people hating on the book generally because it's too similar to Love and Other Words. I think there were a lot of blurred lines in the past. The thing that happened was kind of like more acceptable than had they been like there'd been like a healthy thing going on between the two characters. But I really don't want to spoil anything, so I'm just gonna let you go with that. But don't be put off by the conflict necessarily. I think there is more to it maybe first meets the eye. In order to give this book a fair chance, I think I'm glad that I read it before Love and Other Words. I would still like to read Love and Other Words and just try and like push this book out of my mind a little bit while I read that one. But obviously I can't really speak on any of the similarities between the two books because, like I said, I haven't read Love and Other Words. Probably the way that I went into it was the best possible route if I was going to be giving this book a fair chance, because I didn't want to just be reading it, hating it from page one, because I was like comparing every single chapter to Love and Other Words. This book also read quite a lot like an Emily Henry book, so if you're into those then you might enjoy this. The female main character, like the protagonist, really particularly reminded me of January from Beach Read, which is the book I didn't love, but I didn't care about the character. Like the characters were fine. Particularly January, she was fine. Our main character, Sam, is more unique, which I like seeing, but I definitely think this is like Emily Henry coded. So the book is told in a split timeline. We have the scenes of them growing up together, or Percy spends his summers on the lake, and then we have the present timeline where they're 30 years old and they're attending Sam's mother's funeral, attempting to form something new between them. I kind of much preferred the scenes of them growing up together. I think because when I read romance, I prefer to read for like a little bit of escapism. The present timeline was more kind of like serious adult problems, just having like arguments and work through our serious like adult lives, and I was just like, no thanks. Which I don't know what that says about me, but you know, I'm gonna put that in a little box and put that aside. But yeah, I read this book very quickly. There was no point that I was bored in it, and I had a lot of fun reading it, so I thought I'd give it a 4 stars. And then the final book that I read in the month of August was Frenchman's Creek by Daphne Maurier. So this is a modern classic. This book was written in the 40s, but it's actually kind of like historical fiction because it's set during the reign of Charles II. And I did actually Google when Charles II was reigning because I didn't think we'd all know that. Between 1630 and 1685, so this is set somewhere within the 17th century. But I thought for that setting there was a lot of quite progressive feminism, not just for the 1600s but for the 1940s as well. The book is written by a woman about a woman whose heart doesn't quite align with what society expects of her, and I really enjoyed the exploration of that. I didn't think it was unrealistic for the 1600s, but I also thought it was bolder for the 1940s, which I appreciated. I found this book quite slow to get into. I think that is just the classic thing, with modern classics. The writing is different from more contemporary works, and maybe the story structures in general were a little bit different back then. The second I got kind of about, I don't even know, 40 pages in, I was absolutely obsessed. Like, I thought it was going to be a 5-star read, and this was actually one of my first predicted books. There was this moment where the pirate, I didn't even tell you what the plot was about, please. Basically, we're following this lady. She's an actual lady. She's married to a lord, Lady Donna, and she escapes court life where she's been living with her husband, and she takes her children with her to kind of just like get away from it all because she's sick of the people and the kind of structure of society up in London. And while she's down in Cornwall, she finds out that there's like been this kind of series of pirate activity going on. She actually meets the pirate. She happens to fall in love with him, and she heads on a couple of adventures with him. So the book is kind of based on an affair, but as someone who hates affairs, I thought this was different because of the societal structure and the way that she kind of met her husband and got married to him. He was not someone who she ever wanted to be with in the first place. It made more sense why she had an affair, as terrible as that sounds. And also I think the ending was very like appropriate for that whole thing. It made sense for both the husband, the wife, and the pirate as well. I thought it wrapped up the story really well, just like every single character. Something happened kind of full circle for them, but not in like a really cliche, predictable way. So yeah, like I said, the pirate vibes were just amazing. And that's what really kind of hooked me in this book. It kind of got me over the hurdle of the first few pages. I never hear anyone talk about this book, but if you are looking for a pirate book, so good. There's so few pirate books that actually like capture what's kind of so appealing about piracy, I was gonna say, no, about like the pirate's life, and this was definitely one of them. I'm obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean. That's like peak pirate content for me, and this definitely had like little hints of that. I also love that this book was set in Cornwall. Cornwall's a place I've visited many times in my life across the past few years, since like 2018 basically. It's a beautiful, beautiful area of the country. It's also so kind of magical, feel a little bit different down there, and I really love seeing that kind of depicted in a book, but particularly a book about pirates, because Cornwall does have a history of pirates, so this is based on like real historical events. I thought that was really cool to read about, and also really refreshing to read about pirates and then not being like in the Caribbean, you know. As much as I just said that like I love Pirates of the Caribbean. It was cool to see them slightly more realistic setting. I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. So there you have it, everybody. Those are the 4 books, these 3 plus Every Summer After, that I managed to read in the month of August. Quite a successful reading month. I didn't have any 5 stars. I had a 5-star in the longest time. We all know this by now. But to have 3 4-stars and 1 3.5 star is amazing. Like, those are very, very good ratings. I basically wasn't disappointed with any of the books I read. And maybe we can have a 5-star in September. Every single month we hope for better. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a thumbs up so I can tell that you did. Subscribe if you want to stick around, and I'll see you very, very soon for another video. I've got a very exciting reading vlog coming. 2 very exciting reading vlogs, both in the works. But yeah, I'll love you, not leave you. Bye bye.